So how's 2020 going for you? If you had told me that I'd be sitting in my garage with my industry shut down in the middle of a global pandemic while protesters are marching in the streets, yeah. What's been getting you through these crazy days? For me, aside from endlessly looking for a job, it's been talking to friends and acquaintances to keep up with what's happening in their lives. Virtual happy hours, video cigars, definitely one of my favorites. Sitting 2 yards apart on the driveway with our masks on. We talk about both what's commonly going on in our lives and our unique experiences these days and how we're getting through. You know, realizing that you aren't in all this alone has definitely been cathartic for me. So I figured I'd try to capture some of that catharsis and share it with you as well. Kind of like a relief valve for the soul. My guest today has been a close friend for 15 years. He's a specialist in computer storage, backup, and recovery, and has been a consultant and analyst in the industry. He's currently Chief Technical Evangelist at Druva, which is a cloud-based data protection company. He's the author of 3 O'Reilly books and has clearly earned his title of Mr. Backup. Curtis and I have known each other for a long time. I think we met back in the late 90s when we worked together at a company called Collective Technologies as consultants in aerospace. And Curtis is known as the backup guy. He's got this amazing talent for building, maintaining, and running good backup systems. That's been his area of expertise through most of his career. He's written several books for O'Reilly on technical subjects like backup and recovery and using SAN and NAS. That's one of the things that I think impressed me the most about you, Curtis, early on was you wrote the books for O'Reilly, and I was like, oh, that's so cool.
I literally wrote the book on the subject.
You did, literally, and I have an autographed copy of it on my shelf. I'm very excited about that stuff.
And that, that and $5 will get you a cup of coffee. When I hear about autographed copies of my book, I'm reminded of the scene in Notting Hill where the Julia Roberts finds a book on the bookshelf that says, "Oh, look, this is when this one has been autographed by the author." And he goes, "Yeah, he just comes in and does that. Like if you can find one that's not signed, it's actually worth more money."
That's very funny. Neil Gaiman does that, right? He goes around from bookstore to bookstore when he's traveling, and he signs a bunch of books on the shelf.
That's funny.
Yeah,
I've never thought of doing that.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I'm sure there are many copies of SAN and NAS still sitting out on the bookshelf.
Just sitting out there waiting for
in
my
America.
signature.
So I wanted to get together with you and talk about the world today and what's going on in it and how you're affected by it, how it's affected your business and how it's affected your life. So tell all of us about what life was like before things changed back with this pandemic thing that's going on.
Well, as a technical evangelist, it means I do a lot of speaking, in various forms and seeing people face to face in various forms. So there would be a lot of flying. I live in Southern California. The company that I work for, Druva, is up in the Bay Area. There was a lot of flying up there every once in a while to meet face to face to do some podcast recordings. I have my own podcast, and we did most of those podcast recordings face to face. So that was and it's a quick flight, on Southwest from here to San Jose. It's an hour, and then there were all of the various trade shows and seminars, and depending on a given year, whether it was Druva or some previous employer. For a long time, I actually held the non-enviable. Is that the right word? Not enviable, unenviable.
It
I
works.
don't know. Okay, I held the the position of being executive platinum on American Airlines for over 15 years, which is over 100,000 miles a year, and I've now flown Actually, on American, my little card says that I've flown over 3 million miles on
Wow,
American.
you and George Clooney could be
Yeah,
sitting next to each other
Me
in
and
first
George
class.
Clooney. Yeah, exactly. And so I did a lot of flying. I don't do as much today. Well, none right now, but I don't do as much today as I did in previous jobs. But I still, for an average person, fly an awful lot. I fly enough to maintain a decent status on Southwest now. I don't fly as much on American as I did before, and we'll come back
So
to that.
so you haven't done any traveling since we've all gotten the lockdown order here in California, right?
I have not, yeah, for, like left my house for work since what, the middle of March,
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that.
Wow.
Because
How are you?
San Diego shut down before the rest of California shut down. So San Francisco shut down first, San Diego was second, and then everybody else after that.
Are they behaving themselves down there these days? Because I know LA County's a mess at the moment.
For the most part, not everybody. You still, I just got off the phone with my wife who mentioned that she went to a local market. The people that were there, she said it was like there was nothing, like there was nothing going on. And so her mother, she was there with her mother, and this woman, for example, just sort of, she was picking out vegetables, and then this woman just sort of butted in front of her, no mask, no nothing, and just shoved in front of her to get some cucumbers or whatever, like there was like nothing's going on. So it really just depends on where you go and with whom you're interacting. We did actually just as of tomorrow, we're shutting down bars again.
Why is San Diego so well behaved? Is it population density, or you're just better people than the rest of us out here?
It's definitely not better people. um i i I don't know if I have an answer to that, but I do. I just know that when I go out, by and large, most people are doing their best to socially distance and wear masks when they can. What I'm seeing in San Diego County, and I don't know if it's this way everywhere, is businesses are enforcing it. Right.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
sign at the door says you can't come in if you don't have a mask on, and they are, regardless of what any law says, they are well within their rights to do that. And I've myself, because I don't wear the mask in the car. I myself have occasionally walked into a store, um, to get something and realize, oh crap, I forgot my mask, right? But I'm reminded of that as I come to the front door of the store, and there's a sign that says,
Yeah.
mask required.
Masks required. Right.
Right. And I haven't seen any of these crazy things that I've seen on the news where, people shove employees aside, like, you can't keep me from
Yeah.
coming into your store. I'm sorry. Yes. Yes, they can, because it's
Yeah.
their store.
It's right. No shirt, no shoes, no service.
Yeah,
It's yeah.
exactly.
Um, I I live in Redondo Beach, and up in this part of Los Angeles County. I think the biggest challenge has been, and because I live in one of the beach communities, getting people to behave themselves when they're out in public spaces like the beach. Right?
Yes.
They go out there and they congregate, and they're in a place where you're mostly not going to be wearing a mask anyway if you're planning on going swimming, and that's where probably the worst of the behavior has been.
Hmm.
Um, I have seen people who. So I literally live 2.5 miles from Hermosa Pier, right? And I've been down in this area for 25 years now, and I think I go to the beach once a year, maybe, right?
Hmm.
Because that's what happens, right? I lived in New York for 25 years, and I visited the Statue of Liberty once. It's just the way it is when you live someplace. And all of a sudden, when the beaches became unavailable, everybody had to go to the beach all the time. And it was just that's human nature, I guess.
Mm.
And so that's where I've seen most of what I would call the pushback against things like masks. The stores have been pretty good. You get a little bit of sense of people with entitlement every once in a while popping in, but
Right.
mostly everybody's behaving themselves.
Yeah.
And of course, we've just announced we're closing the beaches for July 4th here in LA County.
Right. Well, you mentioned beaches, and I would also add bars. So for example, last night, there's a friend of mine that I haven't seen in a long time, and we decided to go to a bar, to have it, have some drinks, and we socially distanced and, wore masks when we weren't drinking, and, did what we're supposed to do. And there was this one moment where where I went to offer him like that. We got a sample of some beer, and I was like, "Oh, do you want to try it?" And he's like, "No." Like, I don't want to try your beer sample that you've already tried. I was, oh, right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. 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 But once you get in, but what I noticed was that no one in the brewery, and it was an actual brewery, like, like a small brewery, no one there was staying 6 feet apart. And unless
Yeah.
everyone that was standing at the counter were all from the same household, they should have been 6 feet apart. I think it's that once you take off the mask, like when you have the mask on, it's easy to remember, to do the right thing. But once you relaxed and you're at the beach or you're in a social setting in a bar, and especially if you have any of this is all fake or overblown ideas in your head, it's really easy to ignore all that and then do bad things.
I always question the logic of all the things to open up in the current climate bars. I mean, I understand people want to gather and we need to do it, but there is no way that you can properly socially distance in a bar to start with. And then after you've had a couple of drinks and your inhibitions are starting to go away,
Yeah.
it's pretty clear to see that this is not going to end well. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Well,
that was what the San Diego County said when they decided to shut the bars down again. What they specifically did was they said it's bars that don't have a license to serve food, and they're like, look, if you're going to a building, a business just to drink, alcohol impairs your judgment, and
hmm yeah.
and so what we've made this arbitrary rule. It's like, well, it's not a bar if it has a license to serve food. You could go
Yeah.
to
Right.
a place that has beer and wine and hard liquor, as long as it has a license to serve food. And it's the same problem, but it's like the same arbitrary sounding rule in San Diego. You apparently you don't have this up there in San Diego. What we said is you can go to the beach. You're not allowed to sit down.
Yeah, they tried that. They tried
Oh,
that in LA County as well. They opened it up originally for you could run back and forth on the sand. You could
right,
use the Strand again, which is the bike and walking path along the edge of the beach, and you could go swimming or surfing because we're big on surfing, right? Out here,
right,
that's part of a culture. But you weren't allowed to bring a chair and you weren't allowed to sit on the beach itself. And the biggest problem was there were very few places that were enforcing, right?
right.
So people would go, and I remember there was one incident up in one of the beach towns up here called Manhattan Beach, where a surfer decided to go surfing early on when they had first closed the beaches, and the cop came up to him and he said, or the lifeguard, I should say, came up to him and said, "Sorry, the beach is closed. You can't do that." And the guy got smart with him and gave him crap about, yeah, what are you going to do about it? And he basically arrested him and gave him $1,000 fine. And if we had been doing more of that early
Mhm.
on, aside from the fact that we'd have people yelling fascism in the streets, we probably would have had better enforcement also. It's the same thing with the masks, right? I mean, masks are essentially a voluntary thing. And you're right, it's up to a business to be able to decide what the rules are in their business. Because let's be honest, folks, that's not democracy. That's your private little domain, and you're allowed to do
Right.
what you want to do within it as long as you comply with the law. But if we had like a real legal order that had come down that said, no, for public health, this is required, and if you're not wearing it, you can be fined for this, you might get a better response. Yeah.
By the way, you mentioned about your local domain. So here at my house, we require masks to enter, and that is because my granddaughter Lily has declared it so.
Oh,
And she wrote a sign. She's 6 years old, so she's all about making drawings and signs. And she wrote a sign that says, and she hung it on the front door, and it says mosques are required, MOSKS. So that's the
that's
Preston household.
that is awesome. Uh, I know that having all of these changes come on has actually had not only a dramatic effect on your work life, but it's had a
Hmm.
dramatic effect on your personal life as well.
Right.
Um,
We have I, I'm married to a wonderful woman now for 30 years who is the daughter of an 80-year-old woman who lives down in San Diego. Her father has passed. And we were concerned. And then my daughter who lives here, works at a preschool facility, and she's still operating because they're providing preschool services for essential workers.
Right.
And so my daughter is basically hanging out all day with petri dishes, right?
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and or hanging out in a petri dish, but whatever analogy you want to use there. And so we were concerned. And then my wife goes back and forth between here, and because her mom is alone now, she goes down to San Diego a lot to provide help to her mom. And we were concerned that she would get sick. And so we decided to basically isolate from each other. My wife moved down to San Diego and basically stayed there. And we hadn't seen her other than, I think we had one or two meals together where we socially distanced, also since March, since my last trip. And it was an idea that I got from the trip, because at the trip I went up to Portland, so I was close to the epicenter of what was the epicenter at that time. And so we came home, and I was like, you know what? I've just hung out with 450 of my closest friends in the epicenter of the
Yeah.
COVID.
Of the COVID
I don't
outbreak.
want to go anywhere near you, right? So she moved. That's when she moved down there, and then we just basically stayed. We stayed that way until, oddly enough, we're pretty sure, and this is the ironic thing of all of it, we're pretty sure she actually got COVID. She was sick for 2 weeks with many of the symptoms. She didn't have the respiratory problems, and she officially tested negative, but the doctor said, based on everything else that she had, is he's pretty sure she had it, because there's a high, like 30% false negatives. And so, and then she got better a week ago, and then she got worse yesterday. So she started having randomly a fever again, and body aches and things. And so she's now sort of having a relapse of what her symptoms were, which again continues my, confirms my
Yeah.
diagnosis that she had or has COVID. So now, the ironic thing is, the woman that we were protecting from is the one that it
Is
appears
the one
that
that.
got it amongst us, right? So we won't know for sure until after she has to be symptom free for a certain period of time before they will do the antibodies test on her. So we'll do that. So that's that. So I'm basically living, and my daughter, I have a big enough house, especially by California standards. I have a big enough house that we can socially distance from each other. So my daughter and her husband and my granddaughter pretty much stay to themselves, and then I stay to myself. So it's almost like I'm living alone at this point.
Yeah.
And then of course I'm not going into work. My whole company has, as soon as they shut down Santa Clara, my whole company sent everybody home. And the good news is, as a business, we were able to just function because we're already a laptop driven company, right? So everybody
Yeah.
has a laptop, everybody works from their laptop, everybody has high speed internet at home. So it's just a matter of going home. And then, we already used Zoom. We already
Yeah.
use all of our IT services are all SaaS services. So we were already using IT stuff that was outside of the building. So we literally didn't have to change anything. All we did was stopped physical meetings, and everything is now phone calls and Zoom. So that's been decent. And then the other interesting thing business wise is that, because as a company we are a service that provides data protection services to other companies, that doesn't require physical hardware and stuff. So we've been able to continue business as normal, both providing the service that we provide and even selling it to new customers in the midst of this mess, because we don't have to ship anything to anybody.
That's a great place to be. So everything just kind of continued to operate as normal because you were prepared for it, mostly because the business culture changed to that, right? And that's kind of common in more of the e-commerce and high tech industry
Mm-hmm.
nowadays. I know where I used to work, like business resumption, it was easy because almost all of the things we used were, web-based services. Everybody carried a laptop and we were VPN based. So people were already working from home 2 days a week anyway. I assume that they, as a business, just kind of flipped a switch and stopped coming into the office. There are people who were affected by that. For example, we had a creative team that would shoot video segments that went up on a website or worked on high end graphics and video kind of systems that were hard to work with remotely because they
Mm.
were connected up to these high speed storage devices that required close proximity to them in order to deal with the performance of the imagery. And so I don't know what they did with that. I guess a lot of that could be compartmentalized down and worked on individually, but it gets a little bit harder to pull it all together again and get it ready to go on the air. It also, unless you're going to do the Zoom thing, and everybody's doing the Zoom thing, makes it hard to do that interview kind of process, right?
Yeah, we had a few critical positions that we needed to fill, and we had to interview everyone via Zoom, which is it's not the same.
No, it's definitely
Zoom
not
is
the
a lot
same.
of things. It is not. It is not the same.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak a little bit from experience. So, as you know, I've been out of work for a little while now, and
Right.
of course, in the midst of the COVID-19 adventure, being out of work is an even more of a challenge. And I've had interviews with some companies, and in one particular case, I had an interview round that ran close to 8 hours. And it's literally sitting for 8 hours in front of your laptop on a video camera with different people coming in and out trying to do these interview sessions. And I've set my office up in my garage because that's the only real space I had available to me. And by the end of the day, you're pretty spent when you're spending that much time literally playing to a camera. Now, when you're playing face to face, it takes something out of you also, but you draw energy back from the other person. If a meeting's going well, it's a real two-way exchange and you come away from it energized usually. If it's
Mm.
not going well, of course, it sucks the life out of you and you walk out of the room and you want to go crawl into a ball and die. And when you're on video with someone all the time, it's better than an audio call, right? Because you can at least pick up on facial cues, but it's none of the energy comes back and forth, and you never really know. And so I can say from experience, after going through this for several months, that just trying to do those one-on-one interview type meetings with people has been really, really rough.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say,
Uh,
agreed.
so I know that California was on track to start reopening business again. That
Hmm.
may get interrupted now that we've had cases coming back up. But was Druva on track to start reopening facilities again? And what were they thinking? How was it going?
Yeah, so I'll say a couple things. One is, remember that we, as I mentioned earlier, our actual business isn't impacted by this, right? We've been able to function as a business and continue to provide our service, even though all our employees are working from home. So that provides us some flexibility that isn't there for, say, a restaurant, or someone who's a hardware manufacturer or something
Yeah.
like that. And then the second is that we did do a survey amongst Bay Area Druva employees. I'm sure we did it in other areas, but I'll just speak specifically the survey that we did locally. We asked them what their feelings were about coming back in the office, and the overwhelming answer was, "I'll be comfortable coming back in the office when there is a vaccine for this thing."
Okay.
And so we have decided at this point, we're not going to be thinking about coming back into the office until the first of the year
Well,
at this
okay.
point. So so we've already made the call that we already recognize we're functioning, fine without being in the office. There are definitely inconveniences for sure, everything we've already mentioned, but we're functioning just fine as a business. We had a decent quarter. We even had growth,
Yeah.
right? So we're like, hey, let's let's tighten our belt in the areas where we can. We are not going to be having our two biggest trade shows are not going to be physical trade shows. So we're going to get huge savings there.
Yeah.
Both in terms of the fact that we're not going to be flying hundreds of people and putting them up in hotels for a week at a time, and also that the virtual trade show is not going to cost us what a physical trade show
Absolutely.
would. In terms of we often do, like, we sponsor the drink
Yeah.
place, we sponsor the
Yeah.
stairs and there's all these sponsorship opportunities that I don't think are going to be present in a virtual event. So we'll take this opportunity to sort of tighten the belt without actually any impact, and just prepare to explode once once
The world opens back up.
there's a vaccine and the world really opens back
Okay.
up. Yeah.
So the company's not looking, I mean, I guess it's too soon to judge any of this stuff, right? Nobody's looking at, we have to get back in traveling again. We have to get back in the face of the customers. It's just slow and steady until the world gets better.
Yeah, well, again, it's interesting that you chose me, and I feel quite
Ah,
honored,
thank you.
sir, that you chose me as your first. I mean, I knew you knew that I was a friendly audience, so I'm sure that's why
There's
you chose
also
me.
nobody I'd rather
But
spend a half hour chatting with than you.
oh yeah, I'm so sure. And likewise, the so again, it's interesting that you chose me, because we don't really have that need. We didn't. We had tons of customers that we never physically traveled to. We did so much of our sales already over the phone and over virtual meetings. I'm sure that some of our local sales reps, and maybe more than I know, probably did some on-prem visits, but I think the bulk of our sales were done digitally already. So we don't have a massive need to travel to be with those customers. We also, of course, don't have to travel to help them install physical
Right.
stuff. We don't have
Right.
that problem. We also we don't have any trade shows to travel to, and we don't have any physical seminars right now, right? Nobody wants to go to a physical
Right.
seminar. So, I mean, you could question if they ever wanted to go to a physical seminar, but they definitely don't want to go to them now. So we don't have the need to start traveling. I did want to, I want to circle back to something, because I do want to use this tiny moment. American Airlines has announced that they're not going to follow social
Yeah.
distancing rules
Yeah.
anymore, and they're just going to fill. And as a lifelong platinum, that's what happens when you fly over 2 million miles. You're a lifelong platinum. I'm just going to say I'm not getting on American Airlines as long as I have
Yeah.
another choice. If I need to fly and I have a choice between an airline that is following social distancing rules and one that's not, I am absolutely choosing the one that's following social
Good.
distancing
Good for
rules.
you.
And I honestly, I'm actually appalled at the public decision to do that.
I absolutely, completely agree with you. We've been having a lot of discussions lately about when the world opens up and what travel's like, because you never know when something's going to happen and you have to do something that you may not want to. And a lot of the research that I've been doing says that actually flying isn't that terrible, because with the social distancing on the plane, the HEPA filtering of the air while the plane's in flight, the amount of air that's being pulled through and recirculated in the cabin on a regular basis, if you're wearing a mask, the risk isn't actually that great. And then they go and do this. Okay, so we'll just stuff all of you as tightly together as possible. And it's just a terrible mistake on their part, because it's going to lead to people not flying again. Because let's be honest, when times are good, flying nowadays sucks. So to have to live in that kind of cramped space, knowing that you've got this disease floating around in the air around you, and if you're on a plane with 300 people, the odds are there's at least one person in there that's exposed or possibly even shedding the virus. Yeah, I wouldn't want to get on an airplane at this point at all.
I just don't understand that. And again, I will vote with my dollars, and I will go with
I,
any other
I hear you.
choice.
Okay, so let's start to wrap things up. I have one more question for you. It's really, really important.
Yeah.
You're a big fan of movies and you're a big fan of TV. What have you been watching as you sit at home in your quarantine?
Oh, so I literally last night watched The Good Liar, which stars Helen Mirren and um uh Gandalf. What's his name? Uh Darn it, I can't remember his name. That
Is
is a
it?
really good movie. I have to say that
Okay.
was a really good movie. Yeah. I I also watched the movie that Jon Stewart
Oh,
released. He did it's a thing about elections, and it's a
yeah,
comedy
yeah, I've
starring
seen the
Steve
commercials
Carell.
for it.
I thought it was great.
Was that
Um,
video on demand, or was that just released as a streaming movie?
yes, video on demand. It was and I know this
Yeah.
is one of your topics. It was simultaneously released in
In
theaters
all
and on
5 theaters,
demand.
you mean, that have reopened so far?
Yes, all 5 theater. By the way, did you see the story on the guys that got the number 1 box office movie in the
No, I
US?
haven't
Did
seen
you
this
see
one yet.
this? So there were a couple of guys that they got this idea. They're like, nobody's playing movies, and none of the theaters are open. So they either I think they rented a local small theater. They produced their own movie on Zoom, and then they bought they ran money through the box office, bought $25,000 worth of
It became the
tickets,
number 1 movie of the year.
and then became the number 1 box office movie in the
That's
US for a week
that
because they
is
did this thing.
absolutely awesome. They go down in the history books for that.
Yeah, absolutely. With $25,000, they were the number 1 box office. And the thing is, they totally ran it through the thing, but the money went out one pocket and
Yeah,
went back into
yeah,
another,
yeah.
right?
But
So
it's a great
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
absolutely wonderful idea. It's a great idea.
I am looking forward to theaters opening up again. I do enjoy going to an actual movie screen, and I'm assuming they're going to be socially distancing. And I know that Regal, which I have one of those unlimited things with Regal, I know that Regal has said you're going to have to wear a mask, and I appreciate that. So I want to support that business model, as
Yeah.
failing as it
Well,
is. I'm looking forward to that. They're saying they're going to do that next month.
yeah, but then because things have heated up again, the big studios have pushed some of their releases back a little bit further also. So there is potentially
Yeah.
something to open in theaters next month, but we'll see. I have to be honest with you. I actually went out for the first time since, I guess it was March, right? I had coffee and breakfast with someone outdoors at a coffee shop restaurant, which was nice
Hmm.
because, to be honest with you, I've had very little social interaction face to face with anybody in the last several months. And I went into Kohl's and I bought a pair of sneakers. And that was a little, honest and truly, it felt a little scary, right? Because, I mean, number one, the store is mostly
Hmm.
empty. And number two, it's like this is almost an odd experience now. So that was my experience with getting back out into the real world, because other than going to the grocery store, I haven't really done much of anything in the last several months. And to be honest, I'm a movie guy and I love the movies. And going back into a movie theater right
Yeah.
now scares me. I don't I
Oh, I can.
I, I
Yeah,
don't
I
think
totally
I'd
get
be
it. Yeah.
able to do it until after herd immunity's kicked in and we pretty much feel like we're not going to pass this
Right.
along. Because certainly I won't go in there and take my mask off and
Right.
drink my soda and eat my popcorn, right? Because I don't want to take my mask
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
And I know that they'll do the social distancing thing. I just wonder for how long the dollar value for the business is going to work that way, because they have enough trouble in at the exhibitors making money when the house is packed and they're charging you $12 for a bucket of
Yeah.
popcorn, right? So now we're telling them they have to keep
Yeah.
it at 25 to 50% capacity, right? And the stuff we
Yeah.
haven't heard anything about yet is, have they managed to negotiate better deals with the studios so that the studios keep giving them more
Right.
money to stay alive, rather than the current way it works where the studios take all the money up front and don't leave them with anything to survive on. So
Yeah. Like I said, I will support that business model in any way I can. I'm less scared than you are, in terms of, as long as people are social distancing and they're wearing their masks, I'm okay with it. Yeah. So like I said, I'll vote with my dollars. Well, at a minimum, I will continue to pay my $25 a
Yeah.
month to Regal once they start charging me again. Right
Yep.
now, they've suspended it. I'll tell you the weirdest thing I did since this all happened is I had a physical American Airlines, oddly enough, a physical American Airlines voucher that I had to spend by the by the thing, and my wife wants to go to she wants to fly over to see her other daughter, and then they're going to drive back. I had this and I had to spend it. So in order to spend it, I had to go to the airport. And that was weird to go to the airport for the first time in months. But what was really weird was the airport was a ghost town. And that was the weirdest thing. I actually had a hard time finding an American Airlines employee to be able to do this. And by the way, I that all happened before this American Airlines announcement. So now we have a different decision to make, right? Is the fact that my wife's going to be flying on this flight.
And it's going to be packed. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Curtis, I want to thank you for taking some time out today and talking with me.
Anytime to talk.
What can we plug for you? Everybody should go out and sign up at backupcentral.com. Curtis's site, where he posts very, very helpful and useful information about how to protect your data, and subscribe to his podcast, Restore It All, as well, which is a great, great show. I enjoy listening to it every week.
Where I have this one guest that's been on there, I think 3 times. His name's Jeff Rockland.
I got the idea to
know him.
Do this crazy thing.
Absolutely.
Well, anyway, thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll be back hopefully next week.